All right. Welcome to the Boston Youth Soccer Summit. My name is Caroline Fescato. I'm the president and co-founder of South End Soccer, which is a youth soccer program in the city of Boston, driven to create equity in the sport and bring our community together. And also the co-founder of Boston Unity Cup, which is an adult soccer tournament, World Cup style, bringing together our immigrant populations and our diversity. And we started doing these soccer summits years ago, and they were very well received. And I know we personally have formed partnerships through them, learned about resources that we didn't know about. So it's really great to have all of you here. We're going to start with some welcome and introductions, and then we'll flow through our two panels. We'll have a little bit of updates from the city of Boston and things they're planning. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So please feel free if something comes up so you don't forget to go ahead and put it in Q&A. So we'll start here with introduction. So everybody, as you log in, please put your name and your organization and the role that you are in that organization in chat. So we all know who we are, get to know each other a little bit. I just introduced myself. I wanted to put a quick shout out to Dana Bamford, if you want to give a wave, Dana. So Dana is our AmeriCorps Vista through Up to Us, which is a great organization if you don't know about it. And basically everything that happens right now seems to be because Dana is able to get it done. So she's an amazing partner. And then we have some great panelists that will be introduced in a few minutes. So the first thing before we move past introductions, I have the photo in the back here. We all need to take a minute of excitement about the most recent news on equal pay for the women's national team. So I just needed to take a second and acknowledge that. Not as a player myself, but many people that have played and coached and what this really means for our young women. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I'm going to pass this on to our amazing moderator, Sean Indebelli. He has had a wonderful career in sport and, working in different organizations and different leaders around the positive impact that it has. I'll let him talk a little bit more about himself. But he has a great pedigree, but also he's just an amazing person that really cares about this work and is really excited to be part of this. So I will pass it off to you, Sean.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate you and Dana hosting this today. And thank you to everyone in attendance as well. We appreciate you guys joining us. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about myself. For those of you who know me, I hate doing that. So we'll jump right into the reason that we're all here today. So obviously the last couple of years have been very significant for all of us. And that is no different for sports-based youth development as well. So a couple of months ago, the Center for Sport and Human Rights published a survey aimed to learn from children about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their sporting activities. The survey gleaned some insightful findings, and given today's discussion is focused on the pandemic, we wanted to share some of those insights with you. And you can see here on your screen that 70% of the children surveyed said that sport was less fun for them before the pandemic. 80% of the children surveyed said they were feeling impacted either physically, mentally, emotionally, or both because they couldn't do the sport that they used to do as well. And also nearly 70% of the children who were playing sports said that they were doing less than they did prior to the pandemic as well. And for many of them, the reasons they were playing less included their program was no longer happening, or they had safety concerns or fears around acquiring COVID-19. And then furthermore, the survey went on to analyze the effects of the pandemic on boys and girls, and those effects didn't deviate much between the two. Most children reported that the things they missed most about sport were seeing their friends, challenging themselves, learning new skills, and getting exercise. And all of these things are very essential to a child's development. And I think a lot of this information won't be too surprising to most of you in attendance, as you've likely seen this with the programs and youth that you support yourselves. And I know that our guests on our first panel are certainly not surprised by some of these findings. Our first set of panelists will be discussing the power of soccer for well-being. But before we kick off the panel, I'll quickly introduce everyone. And if the panelists could just give a quick wave when I mention your name so that folks can put a face to the name. So joining us today for the Power of Soccer for Wellbeing panel are Nora Dooley, representing coaches across continents, Liv Emmerich, representing Doc Wayne, Eve Mendoza, representing Boston Scores, Michael Von Cherubin, representing United States Soccer Federation Foundation, and then Richard Ward, representing Positive Coaching Alliance. And then just a quick reminder, we will be having Q&A once both panels conclude. So if you have any questions throughout the discussion, please make sure to type them in the chat. Cool. So for this first question, I would love if all of our panelists could answer this. And Eve from Boston Scores would love to start this off with you. So Eve, obviously, as we've just gone over, there have been a number of challenges with the pandemic. So for Boston Scores, how have those challenges of supporting youth morphed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, for our program, specifically Boston Scores, we are at our elementary and middle school levels, we are school-based. So a lot of the times we had to follow sort of like BPS and City of Boston ordinances around COVID, which pretty much meant that some schools just didn't have after-school programming. So there wasn't an opportunity for our students to even participate. I mean, we've gotten creative around that, but I think that just increase this lack of connectiveness within the school community and with students and teammates. Like the charts, Sean, that you sort of showed before really resonate, because a lot of the time students want to be on teams because they want to create that friendship and that connectedness with adults and creating positive relationships. So the last 2 years has been a challenge, just getting kids back. And also keeping those kids like present and active while also dealing with sort of like the restrictions around being a school-based program.
That's great. Thank you, Eve. And Nora, for coaches across continents, how have those challenges of supporting youth morphed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a little bit different for us because we work directly with local organizations all over the world, including South End Soccer and a couple of other organizations in the US. And so our challenges revolve around kind of similar, like that connectedness, but also how do we support coaches in different ways? Because we know how much that relationship matters. And so how, we support hundreds and thousands of coaches all over the world. So how do we support them to support kids in different ways? And also, I think a huge part of that's changed is how do we support coaches in their own mental health and their own, well-being, and making sure that they still feel connected to each other and to the world, and not just isolated in their bubble and their community. So we had some interesting, a lot of opportunities for innovation, but also a lot of adaptation as well. So it's been interesting for sure.
Great. Thank you, Nora. And Richard, I know you also have a little bit of a coaching perspective as well. So would love to hear about how sort of those challenges have come and gone over the last couple of years.
Sure. So it's first of all, it's important to understand what PCA is, so that everybody knows that it's we are an organization that is really about shaping a culture around youth sports. And so, we have trainings and or things that are focused on developing leaders, developing coaches, developing parents. And then for the most part, most of those workshops, or not even, we don't call them workshops, but those facilitated sessions we're usually in person. But because of the pandemic, obviously that changed significantly. And so we reverted to training our coaches via Zoom and running our sessions via Zoom. So that's worked out really well in terms of being able to, work with coaches and parents and students from all over the country. But it does propose some challenges of being able to, that direct one-on-one interaction that you have with those three constituencies, parents, students, and coaches, is critical. So it's changed the dynamic a little bit, but we've been able to adapt, and it's actually created new opportunities for us as well. So.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And Mike, would love to hear from you on this as well.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Thanks so much for having me. Colin, good to see you. Yeah, I mean, look, what we do for a living is get kids in groups. Full stop. That couldn't happen for a long time, and we had to figure out how to do our work. I think everyone on the panel already sort of addressed supporting kids, schools, coaches. For us as a non-direct service organization at the U.S. Soccer Foundation, right? So we, additionally had the layer of, okay, how do we keep everyone in business? And how do we support you all, the administrators, the fundraisers, the operations people, in addition to the coaches and the kids. And so just to add that layer of just making sure that the whole system didn't collapse. Last year, for example, we didn't rescind, obviously, any grants, even though, grant agreements were, impossible to sort of make good on from about every angle, known to humankind. But of course, what was important, that organizations knew that the checks were still going to clear, and that we were going to be alongside many of you, including Boston Scores, through a very, very difficult time, so that you could be and continue to support the kids and coaches that you serve. So certainly a challenging, exciting, complicated time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. And Liv, I know you come from a little bit of a different lens from the social services side, so would be great to get your insight on this as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see everyone here today. So I'm coming and representing Doc Wayne Youth Services. So we are a mental health organization. So that's where our focus lies and what we've been looking at. And I, with this question, would love to acknowledge just the collective experience of loss and isolation that most all of our youth have been facing. And so it has had a huge impact on the way that we deliver services and the way that we seek to meet the needs of the youth that we're serving, because of course their needs are ever changing. And especially through this pandemic, we've seen that a lot in terms of reintegrating into school, and even kind of home life, right? The challenges that have arisen at home, the added stressors that parents are having and caregivers are having to manage. So for us, when the lockdown started in March of 2020, we obviously still had so many of our youth to support, both through, mostly in the past, we were doing group therapy services. But since the pandemic has started, we actually started doing individual therapeutic services as well. And we moved all of those online. So we completely pivoted the way in which we offer our therapeutic services from being solely in person to now having a whole other system, the Champions Network, that's virtual. And so for us, it's looked a lot like moving into the virtual space and adapting so that we are able to meet the needs of the youth that we work with.
Great, thanks, Liv. And yeah, I think that adaptability has been something we've all sort of been forced into, and a lot of us are still adapting right now, because obviously the pandemic is still not over. So that change is ever going. And Nora, I know you're doing programming all over the world, and so you've been able to see how things have sort of progressed in different areas. But in what ways have you seen the social, emotional, and mental benefits of soccer manifest during the pandemic for some of the youth that you've been serving?
Yeah, this question, I like this question in general because well, obviously like during the pandemic is one question, and in general is kind of another question, but just first to respond to the kind of general approach that we have. I think for us, it depends on what kind of soccer and what kind of sport, because we know, probably all of us know, that sport and soccer is not always all the things we want and hope it to be. I played soccer since I was 5 years old. I grew up, just right around out in the suburbs here. And I think, even though I got a lot of opportunities from it, there are a lot of benefits from it. We love the equal pay. We can celebrate that. There's so much work to be done in terms of making it more inclusive, more safe, healthy, all of those things that we see potential in and we see power in, but it's not the way we're doing it as a collective, as a world, is still perpetuating a lot of the inequalities and a lot of the violence and cultures of violence that we're trying to confront and change. And so thinking about like the opportunity or challenge of soccer and play and sport in the pandemic, we of course had to adapt like everyone else. Our whole approach is based on purposeful play. And so anything that we do is not a traditional game or sport. It doesn't look like traditional soccer. It doesn't look like traditional sport. It looks like a version of it, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. But a version of it that has a different purpose, whether it's just fun and play and movement, or if it's challenging inequalities, or if it's learning about COVID and how to protect yourself and how to take care of yourself. And so we wrote two curricula in partnership with Nike and blasted it out to all of our networks. The first one was around just education, so they could learn through play about it instead of just learning about it the traditional way, which we know isn't always as effective. And then the second one was around mental health. So how can we use play to discuss some of the challenges around mental health, or at least start the conversation around mental health and isolation in our partner communities. And of course, we had to, really be creative about like restrictions and how, like, the kind of games we designed to make sure that there was social distancing possible, to make sure there was a fun way to get alcohol gel and to get hands washing, and just make it more fun, because that, I think, ultimately is what can then potentially lead to, all those benefits. Is if kids are having fun, if they're feeling connected, if they're building relationships, if they're learning things that they want to learn in the way they want to learn it, and not ways that are imposed on them by coaches, adults, et cetera, et cetera. If they can use their imagination and solve their own problems and all of that. So yeah, really just trying to adapt and create tools that our partners can use all over the world, which, just quickly, the last challenge there was adapting to all the different like COVID situations, because there are just some countries in the world that in the beginning were like, nope, no COVID here. We're not going to do any testing, so there's no COVID. And then of course other places where it was quite a little more honest and very proactive about it. So yeah, it was an interesting challenge, but we learned a lot, and then we got good feedback from our partners, but also tons of challenges with implementing games and making sure to get kids still moving and learning, but also respecting all of the restrictions, etc.
Yeah, definitely a lot of moving parts, just in addition to the safety concerns, there's a lot of logistic and administrative stuff that needs to be taken into consideration. So it's tough enough to do it from a local level. So I can only imagine how it is dealing with that internationally. And Michael, I know you're working from a little bit not from a non-direct service perspective. How have you heard from programs that you support in terms of the benefits of soccer manifesting for those youth, that those children are being given through their programs? And I also know you are a little bit of a soccer coach yourself, so you may have seen this firsthand as well.
Yeah, I love the strength-basedness of this question, right? Which is something that we feel very strongly about the U.S. Soccer Foundation. But when you consider what this experience was like, I think it was captured well by Liv. Overall, I don't think it was particularly positive for the vast majority of low-income and vulnerable youth. But there were some opportunities right there. And I think one of them was that the great organizations of the soccer and sports-based youth development community rose to the occasion. And we had organizations that were, doing meals that had never done meals before, that were making home visits that had never done home visits before, that were, daily checking in with their kids and their parents and doing some really powerful work to maintain, connectivity and continue to serve the youth in their community. And so I think what was done was sincerely, phenomenal. I don't overall think it's fair for us to sort of say, look, like all things considered, we made it, we sort of, I think there was some exciting opportunities, and I think, virtual programming has had incredible boom. One of the cool things, another, win, I think it has been more non-traditional coach mentors feeling like, look, they're more comfortable getting involved, right, on Zoom with some kids. I've had some great new coaches join me in my as I volunteer for DC Scores in Washington, DC, that would have never been comfortable as their first introduction. And I think kids have been benefited by more diversity in their coaching staff. And like the texts and the phone calls from my team, and I think from and that sort of that web out from our partners and their coaches, I think was something that was, almost every day there was something beautiful to kind of be, feel good about in a difficult time. Right. So wanting to sort of answer what I think was a great question, while also, Sean, recognizing, and I think we talked about this a little bit, like what a difficult time I think it was and still is for kids, particularly those that don't have access to, the pay to play model, outdoor space. Their parents are still on the front lines and not able to sort of be as safe as maybe me and my family can be on a daily basis. So I think coming out of it is the opportunity is huge for us to, continue to serve more intentionally around SEL, around social, emotional, and health and wellness. I think that's like the silver lining here is like, I think the community was already sort of getting it outside the SBYD space. Like, hey, like we've sort of lost our way. Right. And I think now, like, there's not an organization that you couldn't bring here or a panelist from a youth club anywhere. I truly believe this, that wouldn't say, look, that's a part of how we have to do our jobs. And that's part of bringing kids and families back, because there's something more than just soccer. So some really, awesome work that I want to say our partners did, but and some exciting opportunities ahead for how we can serve through organizations like Doc Wayne, really intentionally, the health and wellness of our youth.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mike. And I know, some things that have come up already is just sort of that adaptability and sort of having to change and adjust things. So kind of sticking with you, Mike, how has the U.S. Soccer Foundation evolved during the pandemic to best serve its various programs and all the youth that they also serve?
I mean, look, I think if we can all remember, right, like that summer, right? So 2 summers ago, I think there was more stuff created by our fields from like May to August of 2020 than there was in like the history of like, of SBYD, right? More new curriculums pivoted, created. Some of them were awesome. Some of them were crap, right? More good ideas and some not so good ideas about how to keep kids engaged virtually. And, so for the foundation, we were able to kind of take some of the swimming lanes out of the pool, which was great for me. I've been there for 9 years. I've been in this space my whole life. For like the CEO to say, look, like make this like, make us unscrewed, Mike, this year, right? How are we going to do this? How are we going to continue, to connect with partners was kind of cool. And so what we did is, so like I said, like what we do for a living, all of us, I think, is we try to connect to kids through sports in a group setting. That's what we always did primarily, right? Even Live, who, they do incredible work now one-on-one. Primarily it was a group setting prior to COVID. So we created 3 additional levels of our core Soccer for Success curriculum. Boston Scores knows this well. So we have our in-person sort of 12-week health and wellness, SEL stuff going on, but then we created a socially distant version. We created a live virtual version. So which I actually ended up, coaching with DC Scores, where I would get on Zoom 2 or 3 days a week with my kids, and we figured out how to send everyone a ball and keep you right. And then we actually created videos. So asynchronous learning for kids. So if nothing else was possible, right? Schools are shut down. You can at least email, or send via text a video of, a coach mentor running a session, and hopefully, get them moving and inspired. So that was really neat. I think we, that was done in 6 weeks, and we hadn't done anything like that in years, which was really exciting. We also created a whole at-home series in Spanish and English, which that's our first sort of direct to consumer product, which got literally hundreds of thousands of views, which is to say people were desperate in that moment. I don't think the videos were that good, and so we had an opportunity, and I think we took it to continue to say, look, if you're Boston Scores, right, and you're one of our longtime partners, you need to figure out how to still be a resource, right? And so look, if it's virtual, if that's all you can do, look, let's do that. If all you can do is socially distant, masks on, no sharing equipment, look, let's do that. When it's time to get back together, Sean, we can do that as well. And I think back to what Nora said about the international space. I mean, dealing with, just what it was dealing with Florida, right? We all know was very different than dealing with California, right? And we have partners in both places, and it's our job to serve them, not to judge how they decide to handle the pandemic. That's not, I have a personal opinion, right? But my professional opinion was I need to get them resources, and they did not need or want the same things. And so it was interesting. So to be able to create that free flowing product was really interesting. And I think one of the, from our perspective at the U.S. Soccer Foundation, is one of the coolest things that we were able to produce out of the pandemic.
Nice. Yeah, great. Yeah, no, those early days of the pandemic definitely tested all of our creativity, for sure. And Eve, Boston Scores is one of the largest after-school program providers in the Boston public school system. So you guys touch a lot of youth. How did you guys sort of evolve to be able to continue having those interactions with all the youth that you guys are able to serve?
Yeah, I think we quickly realized that our standard model of being school-based was not going to work during COVID. So it was all about sort of creativity. And our main focus was just to get kids on the field. So instead of just doing school-based, we did neighborhood-based soccer programming that allowed neighborhood kids to participate, wasn't attached to a school. Mike sort of, also said that there were options, like remote options or virtual options, that we can send coaches and families who may not be comfortable doing in person during that time, but it provided them with an opportunity to still stay physically active. We did synchronous virtual trainings as well with our core staff. So we had Ethan and Nelson online every Tuesday and Friday, I think, and they were running their own synchronous soccer practices as well. I will say that at the high school level, because we do partner with South End Soccer on the high school level, it seemed more regular programming than it was with our elementary and middle schools. I think more so because our high school students are sort of free flowing. They can get on public transportation. It's not school based. They can head over to a practice field. I think one of the things that was really important was that this idea that you can still play soccer and still be safe in a social distancing kind of way. I think the kids really miss the game aspect of it, but it also allowed us to be creative around gamification. So not necessarily having a full 7v7 or 11v11 game, but including that competitiveness into our activities, but still being socially distant was really important, because it kept the kids active, it kept them engaged, it kept them feeling like they were working towards something as a team. And that sort of kind of made them come back every single practice session. So gamification was really like an important thing for us. We tried sort of these like weekly contests of like how many sort of dribbles can you do and how many so forth. But like once you get into like, in-person programming, it was really making sure that we kept that gamification going, even if it was just still sort of like, how many times can you go around the cones? How many times can you shoot on goal without having a goalie, for example? So those things, like we just had to be creative and think outside of the box to make sure that the kids were having fun. And that was like the main thing, was like for them to have fun.
Nice. Great. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, no, it's very, very important to continue giving those kids the enjoyment of playing sport. So very, very imperative stuff. And Liv, would like to ask this next question to you, given your expertise, but what can programs do to train, educate, and prepare their coaches, staff, volunteers who are all interacting with children who are suffering from mental trauma, especially considering that many organizations have limited and or shrinking budgets and are running on volunteer-based programs as well?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, what everybody's been talking about thus far in terms of being creative and adaptable to meet the needs of the people and the youth that we serve, right? Like when the needs change, the ways in which we meet those needs also change. So I think, for us, we are a resource, and we offer ourselves as a resource to the community in offering both the therapeutic services that we give, but also as a result of the pandemic, we have developed a network called the Champions Network, and it began with just this need and during COVID of saying, like, how do we, parents, coaches, teachers, saying, how do we support our youth? And so our director created a web series of kids in COVID, and it boomed, and we saw a growing demand and need for trainings. And so we established the Champions Network in 2020 with the vision of making sport-based mental health services accessible to youth across the globe by empowering their coaches, clinicians, and educators to utilize sport in a therapeutic manner. So I think, our goal really is to offer a toolkit. And I think that that's the way that coaches and teachers ought to be looking at it, right? Is how can I enhance my toolkit? We as professionals, youth development professionals, we are also not doing okay. Like, we are not unaffected by this, right? And that's okay. So I think the basics is to give coaches a way to navigate their team beyond wins and losses and thinking more about life's wins and losses. It's about referring and identifying, not for coaches to know it all or to have it all figured out, but really to be able to refer and identify as challenges arise.
Great, thank
If I
you.
can comment on that, is it possible to comment on that question? So,
Oh, yes, please, Richard, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, because I think that one of the things that I think is most important for any organization that's out there is their coaches, because their coaches are the ones that are shaping the culture of that program, and these are young people that, the emotional development and the learning that comes out of that is critically important. And that's one of the things that we really stress and focus on, is really just trying to make sure that we're working with coaches and organizations that are running these programs to make sure that they're taking that social and emotional development at heart. So we make sure that we create a culture that there's a growth mindset, that we're fostering positivity all the time. And we teach our athletes, our coaches, and our parents the importance of using these tools. If you kind of think about, you probably saw just recently, or just last week mainly, you know, basketball coach from Michigan who just had the outburst of reaction and it was a fight, you know, that broke out. You know, you can't have that in youth sports because those are the kinds of lessons that you're teaching young people. So it's important for us to really be working with those adults so that they're understanding that they're always, we call it filling emotional tanks. So they're always, you know, fostering positivity, talking with young people in a very positive way, that they're providing criticism where criticism needs to be had, but it's in a very positive way, and it's sandwiched by, you know, some positive kinds of statements. So the emotional development of these kids is very important, and the coaches play a significant role in that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, very, very important stuff. It's imperative that children still get that positive interaction when they're participating in sports, especially from their adult role models. And I do want to be cognizant of time here and give some ample time to our next panel here. So we will transition to our next set of panelists, but please remember that we will have a Q&A at the end, so keep those questions coming. So next up, we have our pandemic programming and play panel. I'll quickly introduce this set of panelists, and if each panelist could just give a quick wave when I say your name so that folks can put a face to the name, that would be great. So joining us today are Tammy Endow from Massachusetts Youth Soccer, Gary Hall from the New England Revolution, Fee Wen from South End Soccer, Caitlin South from Soccer Without Borders, and Reg Wilcox from Boston Area Youth Soccer. Great. So I'll start this first question off with Caitlin, which is trying to understand what kind of program offerings that Soccer Without Borders is currently providing or plans on providing that weren't in place prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, great. So with Soccer Without Borders, pre-pandemic, a lot of our programming happened as a community program. So we are serving a lot of youth from East Boston schools, Revere schools, Chelsea schools, and bringing them together on the field to play in soccer practices and actually participate in the NYSL Travel League on the weekends, which was really exciting for them. And then post-pandemic, you know, as a lot of us have already mentioned, we had to get really creative. We were online, and then we had to adjust certain practices to fit COVID protocols, and just a lot of shifting and shaping. And what has really evolved that I've observed is just a really much greater like leaning into our partners and the community. It's been a time of just really a need for collective community where we feel supported by each other and we thrive in that feeling of community. So we focus on that not only with our youth who need that, but also partnering up with everyone else who's kind of on the same mission, doing the same thing, looking for the same opportunities. So I think one of the biggest examples of that is when we weren't able to always have the same sort of competition game, we thought we came up with other ways to connect with other soccer teams and orgs from around Boston to create a community like skills competition. When we weren't able to actually scrimmage or play actual soccer, we developed a curriculum where our youth could participate in these skills challenges with their own team, within their team, but also like in competition and camaraderie with each other. And then when we were able to get back to more soccer play, for the very first time, Soccer Without Borders Boston, we were able to start a couple community leagues where we invited teams from around Boston to come and compete in actual matchup games with us. And so kind of a highlight that all of that has also resulted in our Goal 5 League, where we partnered with South End Soccer and Boston Scores to create a all girls indoor league futsal in the winter, where we have served now 55 girls and counting for the last 6 weeks. And I think that's the biggest change, like moving forward, is just like this need for collective support and the lessons learned of like feeling like we're just all in this together, and wanting to best serve our youth and provide the greatest impact.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a collective effort from all of us. I'm so glad to hear about all the collaborations that you've been able to have with other people trying to do the same as you. Fee, same question to you. What kind of program offerings is South End Soccer currently providing or plan on providing that weren't in place prior to the pandemic, including staff and volunteer training?
Right now, for the current phase, there's what we're planning on. They're doing there for the summer there. So for this upcoming spring is more in terms of trying to get everything back on the field again there. So with certain plays and just we're trying to break through the cycle, making sure we get all the families and players back in, and just trying to get them back on the field again.
Nice, awesome, great. Thank you, Fee. Yeah, very nice to be able to get kids playing again. Hopefully we'll have some warmer weather here in Boston soon. Certainly not this weekend, but hopefully in the next coming weeks. Gary, I know you're working from a little bit of a different lens at the professional level, but still being able to have a grassroots impact. So what kind of programming have the Revs been doing, or are there any plans to implement any new programming?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I think as we hit the pandemic, we wanted to make sure that we could connect with kids while not being on the soccer field. So we ran an At Home with the Pros series that was run by, I can't take credit for it, Caltech Sarah, one of our academy training programs coaches. Again, rallying with our first team and players, and running kind of fun training sessions that kids could do at home on their own. And I think that sort of helped us stay connected to kids. What we also did, which we thought was pretty successful, we ran some Facebook Live training sessions, which were really well received by the players and their families, where we had kids training with us at the same time, and some technological challenges, which I'm sure everyone faced, that we managed to get past, and got to the point where we're running some really good training sessions, and then gradually getting back to being on the field with our training programs. And I think we have to recognize Massachusetts Youth Soccer for kind of leading the way and providing the sort of guidelines on how we all did that, and how we were able to get our training programs back online. So certainly thankful for them.
Great, thank you, Gary. And Reg, what has been Bays up to in terms of programming during this difficult time?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. First for having me and the question. So Bays, for those people that don't know, is a large 50-plus club league that has 1,250 teams at the youth levels up through grade 8, and then a few hundred high school teams that play in the fall and the spring. We've had a lot of turnover in our board members. Primarily, we're all volunteer, and that's taken a toll on a lot of people. A lot of our 50 clubs have a lot of turnover on their volunteer members. So we've had put in a lot of infrastructure things to support the adults that support our kids. So that's an ongoing challenge, but one that we're learning from and going. As we're coming out of this pandemic, there's two things that we are particularly putting a lens on: equity and inclusion, and respect. So from an equity and inclusion perspective, the league is over 50 years old. For over 20 years, we've had our President's Cup, which is kind of the in-league tournament system. Our top Division 1 and 2 teams can roll up and have the opportunity to play at MTOC. Our Division 3 teams have the opportunity to do this President's Cup, but our Division 4 teams got left behind. And some discussion came up about, well, we should change our price structure because we're not providing things to Division 4. We're like, no, we need to provide something for Division 4. These are our less skilled players that may not have another opportunity to be in a tournament type thing. So we're doing some feasibility work and we'll be voting on a board meeting in about 2 weeks. But I'm pretty confident that we're going to open up some internal tournament stuff to our least skilled players. So that's one area that we're moving with a lens of everybody that plays in Bays should have an opportunity to take part in some type of tournament. From a respect perspective, during this pandemic, it's been a challenge on everybody in every aspect of life, and we've seen it on the playing field. A few of you on this call, we've had discussions about this. We've seen use of racial slurs. We've seen disrespectful language and behaviors. And Bays has always had a very strong zero tolerance policy, but this was stuff that we've never seen before, disrespecting referees, etc. So we've put together a respect committee. They briefed me on their work last night, and I'm very encouraged on what we're going to present to our full board in 2 weeks. But really having respect be a theme in our league coming this spring, that we need to respect everybody, referee, players, regardless of background, tone of skin, etc. And that's really a focus we're going to be working on here as we go into spring of 2022. And anybody that's involved in the Bays League, you're going to be getting an email from me as a president. We're going to be asking all of our Bays reps to really get this message down. We're going to be working with our referees. And that's our big commitment for 2022 in Bays is respect.
Awesome, great, thank you, Reg. Sounds like you guys are doing some good things there. And Tammy, Gary gave you guys a little bit of a shout out there in helping sort of lead the way with programming in the state this year. And also Mike kind of touched this on a little bit about how in the early stages of the pandemic, there was a lot of development with new ideas and new programming. So how has that programming changed from the start of the pandemic to what it is now? And do you expect these changes to last?
Some of our programs have changed, such as coach education has changed, where we've gone to a hybrid version of coach education. It's called the blended version, where we are able to offer the classroom session of our coach education virtually. So it eliminates the barrier where we couldn't get any school classrooms to use for the classroom session of the course. And obviously people didn't want to be inside in a group during the courses. So we're still able to educate our coaches in a manner that's safe. Our after school program faced challenges just like everybody else's did, where the kids were, while they were out of school, reaching these kids. We did offer the Top Techers app to the children that participated in our programs for them to work on their skills. They would send us pictures of them doing them or videos. But when we returned to the back to school this fall and ran our sessions, we realized not only was there learning loss, but there's, as everybody else has said, there was huge social and emotional issues and loss. So we sat down and we've been right at this point are redesigning the curriculum as we go into the spring season to weave the social and emotional life skills into playing soccer, and how we can build on those, how they can do goal setting, how to seek help if they need it, managing their emotions, and just appreciating everybody's differences. So those are some of the things that we've worked on with our existing programming. As we've gotten back on the field and kind of just tried to adjust with the new nature of the environment that we're coming back into.
That's great. Thank you, Tammy. Much appreciated. And Caitlin, I want to go back to you very quickly and ask you how you've been able to develop new ways to keep youth engaged with your programming during the pandemic, because I think that's something that everyone has been trying to navigate. Some have done a great job, and some are still trying to figure it out as well. So it would be great to hear how you've managed to do that.
So I think we all just realized how grateful we were when we could spend time together, when it was possible. And for a short time, like Zoom was that outlet. So we used Zoom as a means to do a virtual paint night with our students. we had them compete in an art competition by delivering art materials and sharing that kind of stuff over Zoom. And now, yeah, Zoom was a very short-term fix though. Like I don't know if anyone else has experience with trying to continue to engage students on Zoom, but it doesn't really seem to work anymore. So it's like, as soon as there's opportunities to get the youth together, like we just try to grab onto those and give them those spaces, whether it's going out and scrimmaging, even if there's snow on the ground. One of our highlights has been a food exchange. So we have our families actually cook a meal for each other, and we, the coaches, go and take that meal to one family and then deliver to the next family and next family. And we have great diversity on our team. So, you have one family that's from Colombia, like sharing a meal with another family from Algeria. And just the fact that they're preparing something for another family, you can tell they feel that they're showing care for that family, but then to also receive something in return is really nice. And then I think too, just like listening to the youth and see where they're at, what they need, what are they struggling with? Are they not doing well at school? All right, so let's go to East Boston Library. Let's do a homework help session where, yes, we work on homework, but it's also a chance to hang out and catch up. Some of our boys, if they're getting stressed, like what's a new way to take out that stress and anxiety? We've gone to the YMCA and started a lifting program. So really just focusing on that, what we saw in that data point, the core thing that the youth are missing is just that time together. So coming up with creative ways to bring everyone together based on what the circumstances allow.
Thank you, Caitlin. Much appreciated. Sounds like you guys have been very creative in that. And yeah, I think a lot of us are suffering from that Zoom fatigue as well. And I think, we can all agree that you can't replicate that in-person interaction over a screen. But I know we're approaching close to time here, but if anyone else is able to hang on for a little bit, we'll move on to the Q&A. And we can get some questions answered for you guys. So I'll pass it over to Caroline, and she'll help facilitate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. That was amazing. And all the panelists, your wealth of knowledge, experience, and care is so obvious. I think what we'll do, because we know for some people their schedules are really tight, we just want to put a shout out real quick for Woodley August from the Parks and Recreation Department. If he had any updates about any current programming or coming programming, if there's anything you'd like to share, or that people just know he's someone to get in touch with to find out. Is there anything you'd like to share, Woodley?
Thank you, Caroline. Hello, everybody. My name is Woodley August. I've met many of you. Currently, right now, I'm not seeing the screen, but I know I'm there. Okay, there we go. Currently, right now, I met with Caroline and Fee to discuss revamping our Mayor's Cup soccer program and looking to bring that back in the late spring, early summer, and then working on some other collaborative projects. But other than that, yeah, we're available to work with anyone for any soccer or broader programming. Obviously, soccer is near and dear to everybody's hearts, but we do have a plethora of programs that we offer here. And a lot of our kids do play multiple sports. So, I think, our goal in the next year is to create a systems where we can communicate more effectively with families about, multiple sports, or getting them transferred from a spring sport to a fall sport to a spring sport. I think a lot of that just requires more communication, and we're working with that. We're working on that from our end to make sure that Boston families know what's coming. So if that's around registration for soccer programs, we want to be a point of contact to help drive that, and that that goes for all the sports. So I can only speak for soccer, but I also manage other sports in the city. So we're working on that aspect. New website, a couple different functions that we can, that'll help us promote sports overall in general. And our programs are always free. So that's all I have to add.
Great. No, I think it's good that people just know that you're there and to get in touch with you, as a resource in the city and to partner. And
Yeah,
so
and we also offer free summer camps. So that's a big thing for us.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so Woodley's information is on the Boston website. You can get his contact information. And also all the panelists have agreed that we will share their information with everybody. So for resources, I just want to close out really quick and then we'll just move to staying on for an extra 5 minutes for anyone that wants to ask any questions. But we did feel it's important to, honor that it is Black History Month and Black-led soccer organizations, many that have started during the pandemic. So these are some of them. We'll send this out to folks too, but there's some really great work happening out there that are really honoring, creating diversity and empowering our Black players also. Real quick, just so you know, we are going to send out a post-event survey because we want to make sure we know what you want to hear about next time. We are also reaching out to try and help and support and get a list together of programming kids can do in the summer to keep them going. So we'll get that out to you. And if anyone wants to take themselves off chat, if any of the panelists can stay just for 5 minutes, and anyone that wants to ask a question, you can take yourself off mute or you can put it in the chat. Any of the panelists you'd like to ask.
Hi, Suzanne from the UCal Mackenzie Breakaway Foundation. I just wanted to give Caroline a huge kudos, as well as Sean, for helping lead this. This was so informative. I love that we're getting together and talking and trading resources. It's so needed, especially right now. So less of a question, more of kudos.
And I will say too, just as folks are going to probably need to pop off because we're a couple minutes over, a couple of things that came to mind is, and things that I heard said during this, first of all, to remember. So some people here or that are going to watch the recording, they do sport for youth development. Some do after school, some do community-based, some do high school teams. Like everybody's kind of coming at it from a difference. But I think a couple of things that resonated for me were this is more than soccer. And this connection for the kids and this physical, mental play. It's beyond the wins and losses, having equity in the sport, respecting each other, and then thinking about the coaches and the training that we need to give them. So there's a lot of great resources here if people are needing to look for that. Anyone who has a question, go right ahead. We'll just stay on for a couple more minutes, but please pop off if you're done. Really great to see you. If there's anyone here you want to get in touch with us. We'll get you guys connected, figure out partnership support, and we'll send out information afterwards. And feel free to take yourself off mute if you had any questions. You gotta love it when the people are so complete in their thoughtfulness that people don't understand and have to ask questions. I think you guys did an amazing job.
One question that I have, this might be a good question for Liv, but what can programs do to help train, educate, and prepare their coaches, staff, and volunteers to deal with those children that are suffering through mental trauma right now? I think we covered a little bit, but I know a lot of programs, especially here locally in Boston, have been struggling where they can find those resources. Obviously, Doc Wayne is one, but are there any other institutions in which people can refer to quickly to get some of that information?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what angle you're coming at it from, right? So, like, we're a mental health organization. So, I think about the mental health accessibility and resources. We offer ourselves in schools. I think schools are an amazing resource to find organizations and to find further resources and tools. That's where we do most of our partnering with is with Boston school system and with the Framingham school system. So, I think that those are always a great resource. And then, I think that I'm just thinking more clinically, there's the best team in terms of more kind of clinical. Yeah, and I guess I shouldn't say just Boston, right? We also have our reach is globally at this point, or nationally. We've served over, I think, 200 countries, if I'm correct, or 25 different countries. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sean, can I just add something real quick?
Yes, sir.
Is that all right? I just wanted to mention we're slap bang in the middle of our Touches for Change program. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with it, but we I think it was in 2021 we raised $30,000 for the BCYF. Donations can be made to purchase soccer equipment, balls, and clinics for kids. And I think, during the pandemic, kids weren't able to be at practices. It was great for them to have the equipment to be able to train. So that runs till the 26th. So it's getting towards the end, but all the information's on the website and how to pledge.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, I think people should
sorry.
feel, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, people, of course, drop off if you need to. I can stay for another couple minutes, and then if someone wants to add something, please do.
I was just going to mention that I think when you're looking, Sean, I think organizations that are looking for training, right, there's the Center for, used to be Lead Coach, now the Center for Healing and Justice, Megan Bartlett. There's obviously they're still Up to Us and Positive Coaching Alliance, and there's the US Soccer Foundation. And so there's these, but I think one critical element of every training should be a piece of recognizing while coaches, have an incredible ability to be a restorative factor in the lives of youth, that we need to remind ourselves and our coaches that it is not sort of on us to always be the responsible party for what has been a very difficult, tough years in a large, to a large degree, we need to reflect both the giving the coaches the skills, right, as much as possible, but we're not all going to end up being Doc Wayne. Like, we have to recognize that we're not social workers. Our coaches are volunteers, right? They're showing up, and sometimes we have to let them, we have to make it okay, right, for them to have tough sessions, for the kids to have tough days, and not also overemphasize. While I think Coach Mentors, the US Soccer Foundation, believes, and I believe firmly, that they're the catalyst for change when things are going right, also to give them some grace to understand that they're not, we're not miracle workers. And so I hope that whatever training that you all find for your coaches kind of reflects both, let's talk about skills, right, and drills for our Coach Mentors when it comes to how to, teach SEL, to be resilient, to create, safe places for our kids to grow and learn, but also look, right, we're not miracle workers. So I think that's an important note.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great.
Well, some are probably, I'm not. Right.
No, I think each one of our panelists is probably a miracle worker in some way, shape, or form. So very much appreciate that. So yeah, if anyone's looking for resources, Mike himself is a good resource as well. So feel free to tap into him.
And then, Sean, can I just add something to you around like mental health and sort of like our experience at Boston Scores? I think mental health has, coaches come in with a fear of like talking about mental health, especially because they're not properly trained to do that. And I think like they come in saying like, oh God, I have to be a clinician. I have to be like a psychiatrist and I have to support these kids. And I don't know how to do that. what we've come to recognize is sort of like, and we are part of the Champions Network too with Doc Wayne, and we do a series of coach trainings throughout the whole entire year, is that a lot of times for coaches, it's just talking with an adult, somebody who is an expert around mental health, to break that stigma of like, I don't want to talk about it. I want to avoid it. I just want to play soccer with my kids. I don't want to deal with every external force out there. And it just takes one person to say like, we're not trying to train you to be a clinician. What we're trying to do is just like make you aware of the circumstances that our kids are going through, and having an avenue of resources that you can take your kids to. And that's something that's like super important. We also do the work with PCA as well around sort of like, we're not trying to change the coaching model. We're just trying to add more tools in your toolbox that you can give out to the kids. And I think like overall, everybody's doing somewhat the same thing, and recognizing the needs for everything. It's just like as a group, sort of like sharing that information out, and having like an open source resource center where like organizations can come in and be like, oh, I can pull Doc Wayne if I want to, or I can pull PCA, or, I can pull the US Soccer Foundation, or I can pull BPS, or like Best Initiatives or Edgework. There's so many great organizations. It's just like pulling all those resources together.
I want to be super respectful of everyone's time. I think we could literally talk about this for 5 hours. But we all have to put a big shout out to Sean. He really is a thought leader, and really caring and compassionate about this work and its importance of it. So he took time out of his schedule to prepare for this and to do this. So if we can all just thank Sean so much for his time. And to our panelists, we know you're all very, very busy people. So thank you so much for sharing what you have and agreeing to share your resources with other people, because that's how we get through it, right? That's community. We hold each other up. So I appreciate all of you. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording.